We cannot ever expect one person to know every single thing there is to know about development. And I think it's really important to have that expectation when going to the pediatrician's office, that asking them about milestone development, saying that you're concerned about something from a gross motor, fine motor, speech and language standpoint, they aren't the specialist in that area. That's why we exist, the therapeutic professionals, speech pathologists, OTs, occupational therapists, physical therapists. So if you have a concern and your concern is not validated, that is not fair, because your mom gut cannot be measured. Your concerns cannot be addressed with, oh, it's fine, it's normal. Because if you have a concern, it's valid and you should be supported in finding the right answers for yourself, whether they are, yes, everything is okay, but you're actually told that after getting the right type of evaluation, or it's validated from a sense of, oh, yeah, we can work on these things. Here are some things that you can do at home.
Getting pregnant and giving birth are two of the most exciting things you can ever hope to experience in this life. The moment you think you could be pregnant, you're frantically searching for all the best information, which is why you're here today. I'm Stephanie King, and with my many years of experience as a professional childbirth educator, doula, and lover of all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, I'm here to make preparing for your birth enjoyable, empowering, and totally easy. Each week, I'll cover different topics, interview professionals, and get into the nitty-gritty birth stories from mamas just like you. And when you're ready for more, you can join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I take you step by step through exactly how to prepare your mind, body, spirit, and partner for a birth you love. So let's get started. Welcome back to the Pregnancy and Birth Made Easy podcast. With me today, my guest is Jordyn Gorman. She is a licensed speech language pathologist, feeding specialist, and the founder of Eat, Play, Say. With nearly a decade of clinical experience and a community of over 700,000 parents worldwide, Jordyn has become such a trusted resource for moms who are trying to figure out what's normal, what's not, and how to best support their little ones. So if that sounds like something that you guys are interested in, then today's episode is for you, because today we're going to be talking about those big developmental milestones, what to know about breastfeeding, formula, and starting solids. We're going to talk about how play supports speech and language, which I'm really excited to dive into, and even how to advocate for your baby if you're worried that something might be off, which I think a lot of moms deal with, and especially with the way that things are in the world right now, I think this is something that is at the forefront of everybody's mind. How do I advocate for my baby, for my children? And I think it starts with our babies, and that just, rolls into everything else, or really starts during pregnancy, and then we kind of see it roll into our motherhood and stuff. So with that, Jordyn, go ahead and say hello. If you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of why you created Eat, Play, Say, I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. What a great intro. A decade makes me sound so old. Like a decade of experience. I'm like, oh, has it
Or
been that
full of
long?
good wisdom.
Yeah, let's look at it that way as the wrinkles, keep forming. But yeah, I started Eat, Play, Say. It'll be almost 4 years. End of October was when I kind of took the jump 4 years ago. My son was just a few months old. My background is a speech pathologist, feeding specialist. I had a great job at a pediatric rehab hospital, pre-kids, doing feeding and speech with infants and toddlers. It was really a dream to work with littles. And then I had my son, and he actually ended up having some motor difficulties. I had to really advocate for him. He had flat spot, torticollis, feeding difficulties. And it kind of opened up my mind to how I wasn't as prepared as I thought that I was, even though I was a professional working full time with babies and toddlers at a great hospital. I didn't have the information that I need to really help him. And I learned along the way. So I ended up starting my own business to educate parents on social media. And then I grew to have a PT, an OT, registered dietitian, lactation consultants. And we have just been holistically educating parents all over the world. With the team, I've had them for a little over a year. So it's been great to see Eat, Play, Say bloom into this big, parenting hub is what I like to call it for parents.
Yeah, that's amazing. Will for people who are listening, we say the word holistically a lot. I use it a lot. And I'm like, I don't know that I really stepped back and defined that for anybody. So will you talk about the difference between holistically versus another approach?
Yeah, so for us, when we're using the word holistic, we're talking about all views. So development is not one-sided. And if you're a speech pathologist like me, I know a lot about one piece of development. But in order to really get the full picture with some very in-depth topics like milestone development, starting solids, even breastfeeding, formula feeding, one professional's view isn't holistic because they're missing the other pieces of the pie. So when you have a team, you can say, and you hit all of the different parts of development, motor, speech, feeding, lactation, you're able to really give a wider view and help parents understand whole body experiences like feeding and like all the milestones.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's talk about that first year of life. What are some of those big developmental milestones that parents can expect? And what would you consider a normal range for hitting those?
Yeah, oh my gosh, that's a loaded question. There's a lot that happens in that first year. I think the growth is so rapid from baby to toddler, right? Because when 12 months hits, it's like, well, I have a toddler now. Um, from a motor perspective, obviously parents are looking at the way that their baby moves. And one thing I like to point out is noticing how babies move symmetrically. I feel like that's really not hit enough. And that is a huge thing for all major movements. So, feeding, that's what we talk about, how breastfeeding and bottle feeding are whole body experiences. They're using their core strength, their neck strength, then that translates into rolling, into sitting, into crawling, into walking. So when you're looking at milestone development as a whole, I really encourage parents to look at their babies as what's happening on the left, the same as what's happening on the right. That's a huge thing that a lot of parents miss and don't focus on. So when milestones become overwhelming, really focus on the symmetry of your little one.
That's awesome. Okay, so I know that moms get worried, oh, shoot, my baby's behind, right? Whether or not it's because we're playing with other parents and their children and we're comparing, or we're just not sure, or they read the baby book and it says something different. What would you say to parents that are anxious if their baby hasn't rolled over or sat up yet, or said certain words, or they're not trying to lift up and stand up? I mean, what do you say to parents and what do you recommend?
Yeah, so I like to say the phrase check and see over wait and see and over panic. So it's a nice medium of let me check to see what is developmentally appropriate. So looking at a trusted resource, Eat Play Say, for example, has gross motor, fine motor, and speech and language milestones for 0 to 3 years. So looking at our checklist, for example, and seeing that range of normal. There are going to be some kids in the play group that are sitting up at 4 months, and you're like, holy moly, should my kid be doing that? When we know the range for that is until 7 months. So your little one might be 6.5 months before they sit up on their own, or 7 months. So checking and seeing against a trusted resource checklist is the first thing. Then if you notice, oh, my little one doesn't hit this box, don't freak out yet. Try to work on that skill because perhaps they just need more time to explore. They need a little bit more of your attention on that one little skill. If you're seeing improvement, you're like, oh, great, they just needed a little bit of help. But if some time starts to pass and you're like, you know what, we're stuck. I feel stuck. My mom gut is like, listen, we're not moving at the pace we should. This checklist is telling me my little one should be doing this by now. We've tried it. Okay, now it's time to go get some help and see what else is going on. So there's like a 3-step process to actually getting help. So don't freak out right away if you're noticed, if you're like, or if you're nervous.
Yeah, it makes me curious too. For moms that say that they are like they've hit that 7 months and baby isn't doing whatever, like what does happen from there? You're talking about this 3-check process. So you practice it, say that they're still not doing it. Could it still be normal?
Normal is a really hard word because I feel like the opposite of normal is not normal. And then it's like, oh my gosh. But we
Right.
have to remember that all babies are on their own timeline. So, for example, both of my littles needed help. We got early intervention for my daughter because she wasn't crawling by 10 months, wasn't even like close to getting in a crawling position. So she ended up being delayed, gross motor diagnosis, gross motor delay diagnosis. We contacted early intervention, which I can explain that process then for parents. And then after 6 months, she was able to catch up. So what she was doing at that time, yes, wasn't normal, but it was treatable, fixable, helpable. And then she was on her own timeline to get to the rest of her milestones.
Well, and I'm curious too, and you can touch on this later because I know that this is going to be probably a little bit longer of a thing here, but what's the harm in waiting? Is there harm in waiting why do you recommend jumping in at that point? Yeah, if you can kind of go over all that, I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So obviously, research and things are still developing um, all over, but we know that generally speaking, 50% of kids who don't receive services if there is a known or a suspected delay when they're in the early intervention stage, so 0 to 3, will not catch up on their own up to 50%. So you're basically gambling here. There's a 50% chance little Jessica will catch up, and there's a 50% chance that she may not. And then that could further, okay, now we're having a delay in further gross motor tasks or further speech and language tasks because we didn't get the help ahead of time. Luckily, in the United States, early intervention evaluations are free in every state. The evaluation is free. So you can call your local early intervention. The number by state is on the CDC website. You just Google early intervention by state. They all pop up. You call. You can schedule an evaluation for free. No pediatrician referral necessary, no physician referral. Just parental concern is enough to get that free evaluation and go for there. So since we're kind of gambling 50-50, I recommend not waiting, especially if you took that 3 step of checking and seeing, trying to work on the skill yourself, and now you're still not seeing progress. It's time to make that phone call, in my opinion.
Okay, and so early intervention, so I haven't even heard of this, which is crazy. Like I've heard of, it took me a minute to hear about occupational therapy, which I felt like that
Mm-hmm.
was a separate conversation. Nobody talks about it. My pediatrician never mentioned anything, right? Like I had to, somebody came to me. Early intervention, I'm kind of on the same thing here. So for moms that are listening, it's separate from your pediatrician. It's a number you can call. It sounds like there's offices. Is that what you're saying in your area? And you go to these
Yep.
offices, what does that look like to have an appointment with them? And you said it's free, at least the first visit, or is the intervention free? What does that look like for parents?
Sure. So the evaluation is free, and depending on what state you live in, the therapy is either free or low cost. So for me in Pennsylvania, the therapy was actually free as well, and it's done in your home. So you do not have to physically go anywhere, which is great. And honestly, is the most appropriate and best place to have an evaluation because you want to see what your little one is like within your home environment. So each state has different laws by how many days they have to get an evaluation on the books. But typically within a couple months, you will have an evaluation by the professional that's most appropriate for your concern. So if you have speech concerns, a speech pathologist or an early educator will come. Physical therapists may come to do your evaluation if you have motor concerns, OT for feeding, et cetera, et cetera. And then from there, they determine if you qualify for services based upon whatever the state's standards are for service qualification.
Okay, so for yourself, did you find out about this because you're like, my baby's not hitting some of these milestones at my pediatrician appointment, and you brought it to your pediatrician and they gave you the information? Or how did it come up? How did you end up finding out about this?
Sure. So I have referred littles in private practice to early intervention as well because it's free services, saying,
Yeah.
hey, you can double up. Like, it's great that you're coming here 3 times a week, but you could also perhaps get early intervention for free an additional 1 time a week. You should use this free service. So with my schooling and education, I already knew about this, even with my son when he had his difficulties. But the pediatrician usually has this information. You can always ask whoever your physician is, are there any free or low cost services in my area? Their offices should have this information for you. And like I said, for early intervention, it's free for you to call, no referral necessary. So even if your pediatrician is like, you don't really need to worry about this, wait and see, or they're not supporting the concerns you have, you don't need their approval to go through and schedule that evaluation.
I love this. I'm so glad we're talking about this, and I can't wait to like blast this out on email and social and like what a wonderful thing. Why are these things? I feel like these should be like shouted from the rooftop. You should go home from your hospital like with this information, and maybe you do. Maybe it's just part of this massive packet that you're like, I don't know. But
Yeah, no, it's for if you spend time in the NICU, they do bridge you to early
okay.
intervention for sure. But typically, for a typically developing baby or a birth that goes fine, they really don't give you this information. And because it's free, the evaluation is free. I wish every parent had this in their back pocket because it is an amazing tool that you may need. And both of my kids actually needed it and were able to discharge from it, which is so great. It's such a good tool.
Yeah, and I love what you said too, and I think it's really important. So I'm going to repeat that. And I'm going to probably throw this on social as well. That if you catch it within those 0 to 3 years, those first 0 to 3 years, that you can catch them up. But afterwards, what you're saying is if it's a motor skill thing or if it's a speech thing, then you'll continue to see delays in those areas as they grow. Is that correct?
You're more likely to. The earlier we can catch it, the better. We never know what a child's journey is going to be. We don't know how severe a delay may be or how mild it may be. But the earlier, that's why it's called early intervention, because we know from research the earlier we get little ones the help and the earlier we start making progress, the less likely they are to be in therapy long term. You're preventing further delays or difficulties down the line as well.
I love that. All right, let's jump into feeding for a second because this is another one, right? When we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about our children, oh my gosh, feeding can be such a tricky thing. And especially for new moms who are trying to figure out, am I breastfeeding? Am I formula feeding? Am I doing a mix of both? What advice do you have for moms that are kind of going through that?
Yeah, I feel like it's really hard, especially statistically. We know that, 75% of moms are going back to work in the first year. We know that 84% of moms initiate breastfeeding, but by 6 months of age, only 25% are exclusively breastfeeding. So we know that there's a lot of different options for how to feed babies. And if I could go back to even myself as a first time mom, really educating myself about A, who can help me meet my goals, and B, what are my goals? And they may change. What am I comfortable with? What am I not comfortable with? And getting that education ahead of time. I always recommend if you have a goal of breastfeeding in any capacity, finding a certified lactation consultant or an IBCLC, an international board certified lactation consultant, before you give birth. So if you run into any issues, they are a phone call away. That was a huge difference between my first and my second, having Janelle, my lactation consultant, there to help me. And also educating yourself about formula. If you have to use it or want to use it, what are the ingredients that matter to you? We educate a lot about this on our website as well as on social media to help parents. And also understanding combination feeding. Introducing formula doesn't mean that your breastfeeding journey has to end. You can do both together. It takes work. It's definitely not just, oh, I'm just going to throw some formula in here and breast milk in here and wing it. But it can be done. And sometimes for parents, depending on their lifestyle, that is a good option too.
Okay. Could you take a minute and talk about kind of formula? You're like, we talk about this, we educate on this a lot. What are some ingredients that parents are curious about when they reach out to you?
Yeah, so I think one of the main myths I've just talked about this last month actually of formula is that they're all the same. Everyone's like, oh, they're all the same. They're like the cow's milk based ones if you don't have an allergy. And they're really not. In the last decade, there have been new formulas that have come out that are really focusing on getting the most fat from whole milk, right? Instead of having to use oils. You have to use some oils in order to get the fat content up to be similar to the levels of breast milk and pass for FDA approval, but really looking at where are the main fat sources coming from. Are there any additional fillers or things that may not be needed? Is soy needed? Maybe not. Corn syrup solids, is that needed if there's lactose instead? So really looking at what the ingredients are and where the main sources of nutrition are coming from is something important. And knowing that they're not all the same. But if you can make an educated choice and get the one that's best for you, the most affordable for you, the most available for you, yeah, that's making the most educated choice.
Okay, thank you. All right, so since we're talking about feeding and we're talking about breastfeeding and the formula kind of thing, how do you know this isn't the next issue is how do I know if my baby's getting enough? So for moms that are listening, what are those signs that baby's getting what they need? And I'm sure some of it's developmental, right? So I want to
Yeah,
hear
I know.
that.
Yeah, for sure. I know it's hard because you don't know how much your baby weighs, and everyone is like, should I just buy the infant scale? Should I just weigh them after every feed? And that's a lot. It's a lot to think about. So if you're breastfeeding, if you're nursing, the best way to know if your little one is getting enough is their output is going to tell you what their input is. If they have lots of wet diapers, if they have regular bowel movements, if they are satiated after a feed, they're not cranky, they're having typical wake windows, they're sleeping a typical amount, they're not just falling asleep on the breast the second you get them on. Those are all really indicative that things are going well between those weight checks of when you're going to the pediatrician or when your lactation consultant is coming over to weigh them. So always remember that output equals input. If what's coming out looks good, what's going in is likely good.
Awesome. How about starting solids? Can we and at what age are you recommending, or do you have some guidelines for that? And then I know there's a lot of discussion around like baby led weaning versus purees, or do you want to speak to that at all, or do you have an opinion on that?
Oh, I have so many opinions about starting solids. That's kind of how I started my whole business,
I love it.
was talking about starting solids. So, my biggest bone to pick right now, and I talk about this a lot on social media, is the whole I got a green light from my pediatrician at 4 months to start solids, to start specifically with rice cereal. And I'm like, why are we still talking about this? So, to back up, the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, recommends that little ones start when they can at least sit up with support or sit unsupported. And we know that that milestone is around sitting up with support, 5 months, sitting up unsupported, 6 to 7 months. So we know that 4 month olds are not, expected to sit up on their own. We also know that offering rice cereal is completely outdated. First of all, it's just really not nutritious. There's really no reason to give it. It doesn't have a lot of fats or proteins or those good vitamins and minerals that baby needs. And it's putting them at risk for heavy metal exposure that they just don't need. There's no need for that exposure because there's no nutrients coming along with it. So skip the rice cereal if you're listening to this. You don't need it. Starting solids closer to 6 months also means that baby's more likely to self-feed, which is a huge thing, whether you're baby-led weaning or using purees on a spoon. Baby being an active participant in meals, we know that they're way more likely to eat more foods, to have a good time in the high chair, to feel in control of eating, which will make them more of an independent eater later.
Okay, I have a question because I know that moms are going to be like, I'm breastfeeding, and at 6 months, my baby's looking like they're really wanting to start eating or whatever. What's the recommendation? I know what I did, but I want to know, like, is there a recommendation for, like, do you nurse them first and then feed them? Or, like, what does that look like for moms who are breastfeeding and wanting to introduce solids, but they want to continue breastfeeding?
Sure. So I think this is also a good time to point out that I always say to parents, there's what the research says and what we recommend, and then there's what works for you. Sometimes those things intersect beautifully. Every single dot lines up. And oftentimes some of the things don't line up, and that is okay. Defaulting to what works best for your family should always be the answer. So typically, especially in the first like 6, 7, 8, 9 months of age, we really want to prioritize breast milk, formula, first and space those solid meals at least 30 to 45 minutes after that, because the main form of nutrition in that first year is breast milk and or formula. But then as baby starts to near a year, we are getting to 3 meals a day. They may be showing a little bit more interest in food, nursing more for comfort with a few meals, or they're not taking as much, or with a few nursing sessions throughout the day, not taking as much from the bottle. And you can flip that and start prioritizing breakfast, lunch, and dinner and throwing those milk feeds in around.
I'm curious, and this is just like, I don't want anybody to feel judged when I ask this question. Like, I'm genuinely curious about your thoughts and feelings on like the go-go squeeze pouches and the little like melts that people use, and all the like fun stuff, like really available things that's easy to like shove at our kids. But what are your thoughts on that? And in regards to nutrition, and I know that you're talking about, sometimes it's what's easy for our family and stuff like that. But do you have some ideas for moms that are curious about that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think pouches in particular have become they're talked about really negatively online, and there are definitely risks and things to be cautious about, but I think we have bigger things to worry about than pouches. But I think pouches, any type of processed foods, just in general, we really don't want those types of things to make up the bulk of our calories, even as adults. We really want to be focusing on whole foods, homemade meals, and not be focusing so much on the ready to go pouches, melts, and things like that. They are super great for having in a pinch on the go. Pouches are also great to have in your back pocket if you're dealing with constipation. It's fiber and a liquid together can really help littles poop. So I do like to tell parents, like, hey, think about your little one's wet food liquid content if you're dealing with constipation. Try some purees, applesauce. A pouch may help just get things moving for you. Melts sometimes are great for parents who are really nervous about chewing and starting solids, like starting like the solid part. So they can really bridge the gap for those parents from purees and mashed foods to chewable foods because they dissolve on contact. Can give parents that confidence of, oh my gosh, they can chew, like they can actually chew some. And then they may be willing to give more chewable whole foods after. So pouches and melts are tools that we have. They should not be making up the bulk of our calories and should not be in every single meal all day, but they're definitely things that you can use to your advantage.
Okay. No, I appreciate that. I think there's just been a lot of talk too, we talk about insulin resistance and stuff. There's a lot of like nutrition talk that's happening right now. And it had me thinking even, about my littles and how much sugar and stuff was in the things that I was giving them. And I do notice like when I was doing stuff at home, when we cook at home, like you were saying, or we puree our own vegetables or even our own fruit stuff, I just think there's so much added sugar and things too that we find in in the stuff on the shelves. And what's really interesting to me, and this is, I'm just gonna, anyways, one of my kids ended up needing to meet with somebody for food stuff, right? And he didn't need help eating or anything, but we were worried about his weight gain and all of that. And I'm a tiny person, he's a tiny person. Sometimes it is what it is, but we wanted to make sure we were doing what we needed to. And the lady that came in to talk to me about the nutrition parts of things, she goes, some of the best ways to get good calorie or like a lot of calories in is just get that like big thing of like cheese puffs or, Cheetos, or she just started naming all these things. And I'm like, this is your nutrition person. And I just looked at her, I'm like, I can't do that. I can't like fill his body full of processed just junk. I can't do it. And she ended up walking out. I was polite about it, but I think the doctor had agreed with me and she was just like, I'm done. But I thought, what an interesting place to be because I don't know, you have some people like yourself online with these great resources where you're like, actually, if you make some of this stuff at home and add this and that, like this can actually be really great for your child. And it doesn't have to be all this processed junk just for the sake of calories. So I thought that was an eye opener for me, just kind of where things are at. That was even within the healthcare system, right? For me to go and get help, that was their nutrition person. So just blew my mind. It was so
Gosh,
weird.
that is so interesting. I know for anyone listening, if you're trying to get your little one to gain weight or you're trying to pack protein or pack good quality fats in, make a smoothie. I always say, first of all, it's a great activity for your toddler to do because it gets them to interact with foods they may never have touched, like raw spinach. That's just going to go in the smoothie and you're not going to taste it. But scooping in that whole fat Greek yogurt, an avocado or two, nut butter, and then pairing that with like a hard-boiled egg that you guys can crack and peel and open together. And those are eggs in different ways are fun, but there are so many whole foods that are really like really high calorie, really nutritious, high protein, where you don't have to go to the junkier foods or the processed foods, even though I'm sure those taste great. Like I love cheese curls,
Right. Yeah.
I used to eat them. They were like my go-to. I'm pregnant with my third and I'm like, God, I have to go for a cheese curl right now. And my husband's like, how long's it been? I'm like 15 years at least, but I
Yeah.
could go for one.
I love that.
But
Well,
yeah,
and
there are
even
other
like
ways
when you're
around
talking about
it.
the smoothies versus like the Pediasure and stuff, which again, time and place, like and what works for your family is great. But if you look at the ingredients on Pediasure versus what I can do at home, like you were saying, adding an avocado and whole fat milk and maybe some peanut butter or whatever the case, and get those like healthier, good fat calories in there. I mean, and you can hit the same numbers on the back of that Pediasure really quick with healthier ingredients. So, but I think parents need to know that too, even
Yeah.
early on before I was like cooking and stuff at home for my family, I came from we opened up a can of corn with dinner and a can of green beans and we had our packaged potatoes and that's just how I grew up. So I didn't know that like you can literally make everything from scratch. So when I was looking at baby food and things like that, I'm like, well, how does it get to be what it is, And so, yeah, I think taking a little bit of time and learning some of those skills can be really useful as a mom, just take with you for the rest of your life. But
Yes, for sure. And you make a habit and then all of a sudden that's how you're eating. That's
yeah.
what you go to instead of looking for something on the shelf.
Yeah, totally. All right. Can we shift into kind of the play and communication? Talk to me about that. I eat, say, play. Let's get into the play part of things.
Yeah, so a lot of parents when I go back to thinking when I worked in the hospitals and the clinics, when I would have little 0 to 3, I would just play with them. And I remember parents thinking like, are you doing speech therapy? Because in your mind, when you're working on communication skills, you think of like flashcards. What is this? What is that? Say dog, say cow. Okay, that's speech therapy. But what we really need to know is that littles from 0 to 5 actually learn best through play. They are not learning best through sitting at a table, doing some type of workbook activity, drill like types of activities. So every time that you're playing with your child or your child is exploring something, flipping through a book, knocking down a tower, they are learning how things work and therefore learning communication and learning vocabulary because you're pairing those words on top. The tower fell down. That is so much better than what is this? It's a block. It's a tower. Say tower. It has no purpose when it's in a picture, but they're learning how things work and they're going to want to do it again and again and again, imitate you, and then actually verbalize back to you what is going on.
I love that. So at what time do you start play with them? Is this between that 0 to 3 months for speech as far as that's concerned? And is the play just for speech? Is it for motor skills as well? Like how is that used?
It's for everything. It's for all development, for cognitive development, problem solving, social communication. That's where that pretend play comes in toddlerhood. They're learning social communication, routines, like when they're acting out at going to a restaurant. Play is how little ones learn how to sit up, reach, hold on to things, bring things through their mouth, cruise around the coffee table. If they're not motivated by toys or by some type of an engaging play activity with their caregiver, they're not going to actually start to move their body and move around. So, play is the foundation for all learning, for all communication, motor movement. It's literally, and it's the easiest thing. It's just so simple. Being on the floor in the moment with your little one is one of the simplest things you can do.
Okay, to take things down a different direction for a second then, or just out of my curiosity. So for the children that you're seeing now, are you seeing issues because of phone usage and stuff? Are you seeing more delayed, whether or not that's the child on the phone or mom distracted and maybe not being as playful or the caregiver? Or, I mean, what are you, or have you noticed over time, like it matches up with the social media use? Or if there's something like that, I'd love to chat about it.
Yeah, I think this is an area that they're still currently researching, but the distracted parent is definitely something that we can say exists, right? We have so many more things on our fingertips or on our plate right
Yeah.
there that could distract us from being with our kids. We're also juggling way more as parents. The work from home lifestyle where sometimes you have to try to provide childcare while you're working from home. Our phones, our tablets, everything is always accessible to us. We get an email, we can answer it right there. So I'm interested to see what's going to come out in the next 5 to 10 years as they're currently watching this population, basically of like elder millennials, and like Gen Zers start to parent. But I'm not so sure that right now we can draw any conclusions to our children overall more delayed or more behind or more socially delayed. But I do think it's something that we really need to be mindful as parents. Our parents didn't grow up with these distractions. So there is a completely different type of parenting style perhaps going on just because of the digital age that we live in.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been on the forefront of my mind for sure. I know we see it with our teenagers and stuff, but I mean, early on, we're handing children devices and we get addicted to them ourselves. I didn't have a phone till I was an adult and I had children, and I find myself scrolling for no reason and not paying attention to things that are happening around me, including my children at times. So I do think it's on par with that whole distracted parent and all of that.
I think with a lot of the push for like Miss Rachel, YouTube, doing online things, even like Barney's coming back, which is what I grew up on. I love Barney.
Right.
I think it's the same type of principle as like Pouches and Melts, that those types of educational TV shows or educational screens are tools that we can use. But at the end of the day, we need to remember that littles learn best from parents. Parents are never going to be able to be replaced by a person on a screen, a technology, some type of digital tool or app. And I feel like since Gen Z, younger millennials grew up with technology, we learned from technology, we kind of think that our littles can learn from it too. So just make sure that there's that reminder of, yes, this is a tool, but at the end of the day, my littles learn best from playing with me, and that can never be replaced.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. I remember there was a video that was going around years ago. I'm sure it's still going around now. And it showed a mom and her little daughter. and she had the phone with her. So in the beginning, she's playing with her and talking to her and looking her in the eyes, and the little girl is reacting and smiling, and they're, working together with whatever they're doing. I think she was in like a high chair because she was very young. And then they're like, okay, now just stare at your phone and don't interact with her, right? So she's like not giving her any attention. She's not smiling at her. And the baby starts getting frustrated. She's like flailing her arms and throwing stuff and like sad and like confused, and you can just feel like the anxiety or like just stress from her. And it was such a good lesson. It was such a short video and such a good lesson of like, our children need our attention. They need us to look them in the eye. They need to feel our love for them as we're interacting. I mean, it's huge. It sets them up for the rest of their life. And when you're talking about this 0 to 3, we can talk about speech delays and all this stuff. Like, if that's the case, if early intervention for these things, like there's going to be an issue catching up all along the way, imagine not getting the right emotional attention or the right love or the right touch. I would imagine that does all the same thing and rolls into the rest of their lives. So yeah, I do think it's a big conversation, but a really important one for moms to think about, for parents to be a part of. So
yeah, I agree.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about advocating for your child, because sometimes we're noticing things, right? We're with our children all day, every day. I think we're the best people to tell somebody if things seem right or if they're off. How do you advocate for your child if you notice that something doesn't seem right?
Yeah. The first line of defense, or the first step parents usually go to, is their pediatrician. And I always want to tell parents that pediatricians are great. They are very educated individuals, especially from a medical lens. But we cannot ever expect one person to know every single thing there is to know about development. And I think it's really important to have that expectation when going to the pediatrician's office, that asking them about milestone development, saying that you're concerned about something from a gross motor, fine motor, speech and language standpoint, they aren't the specialist in that area. That's why we exist, the therapeutic professionals, speech pathologists, OTs, occupational therapists, physical therapists. So if you have a concern and your concern is not validated, that is not fair, because your mom gut cannot be measured. Your concerns cannot be addressed with, oh, it's fine, it's normal. Because if you have a concern, it's valid, and you should be supported in finding the right answers for yourself, whether they are, yes, everything is okay, but you're actually told that after getting the right type of evaluation, or it's validated from a sense of, oh, yeah, we can work on these things. Here are some things that you can do at home. So that is really why knowing that free early intervention evaluation service is there for you if you need it and you want to see it through.
Yeah, I love that exists too, because I'm like, on the other side of things, I do worry about being the anxious parent. And I know I'm not alone in that, where I'm like, should I really worry about this? Like, is there something there? And knowing that there's somebody that I can go to, even just to say, yep, it is normal. Like, no worries. Like, I feel like I can take a breath. But I love what you said about pediatricians too. That's kind of, something that we chat about too. And it usually comes up with like breastfeeding, because it's like, yes, they are great providers for your child and all of that. But when it comes to breastfeeding, you're talking about certified lactation consultants or IBCLCs. And these are the people that study and spend the hours and all of that. So what your pediatrician knows or doesn't, it might be very, very small. And oftentimes the solution is, well, would you like to try some formula, right? And that might be what the solution would be if you met with somebody that could really help you, but it might not. And so, I think that's really important, getting the right help from the right people. Kind of along with that, actually, since we're finishing up the episode, talk a little bit about what you do, how parents find you, and how you work with them throughout the process to get what they need.
Yeah. So right now, most of our families are coming from social media, from Instagram. That's kind of where I found my community. And then also finding us organically through searches online for anything development, feeding related, even product recs like cups and things like that. So we have a ton of free resources that you can grab, freebies. Our 0 to 36 months milestone checklist, our free smoothie recipe guide, which is honestly one of our most popular ones because we are very pro smoothie over at Eat Play Say. And then we also have digital download handbooks for everything: infant feeding handbook, breast and bottles, playbooks for 0 to 3, how to meet your milestones through play, which is something we talked about, starting solids handbook, weaning handbook when it's time to get off bottles and wean from breastfeeding. We have so many great holistic resources. And we also have all of our professionals available for one-on-one consultations if parents need any help within a week or two. And we also help parents find local help if they need more than just a consultation.
I love that. Thank you. And I'll make sure to put everything in the show notes, and I'll send it out in the email this week for those of you that are listening and you want to be able to get in touch with Jordyn or reach out to Eat, Play, Say. Before we jump off, if you could give women that are listening, moms who are coming up to being just like most of the women here listening are pregnant or newly postpartum, if you could give them some encouragement right now, thinking of like now through the first year of their baby's life, what would that be?
Yeah, I always tell new moms, I'm pregnant too for the third time, so it's interesting to go through it
Congratulations.
again.
Yeah.
Thank you. To go through it differently. Try your very, very best to not let other people's opinions of how you are raising your child, feeding your child, playing with your child shape how you are going to raise your little one. I spent the first year of my son's life being so concerned about extended family members at Thanksgiving, people commenting on my postpartum body, people commenting about my son needing to wear a helmet for torticollis and head shape, that I was robbed of the joy of many, many moments where I could have just been more focused on him and what I wanted to do with him. So try to just focus on what is best for you and your family and block out the noise of what other people think.
I love that. That is a perfect place to end. Well, thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for being here today, for all your wisdom and advice. It's been such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you for having me.
If you loved what you heard today, the very best way to support this podcast and help other moms to find it is to leave a quick review. I read one at the beginning of the episodes, and I would love for yours to be next. And if you're ready for even more pregnancy, birth, and postpartum goodness, come join me in the My Essential Birth course at myessentialbirth.com, where I will hold your hand and walk you through pregnancy and birth step by step so you're totally prepared for a birth you'll love. See you next week.